Bonus Locked On Jayhawks here. The IARP ruling from the NCAA is officially out. The 6-year case over Kansas basketball stemming back to the 2017-2018 season is finally done. Did Kansas get any other punishments? What came out of it? What's next for KU? We discussed that on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. And on today's bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks, we're talking about the IARP decision that came down. No added punishments for KU basketball. They had some self-imposed punishments last year. Those served as enough. And honestly, based on the report that came out, those might have actually been too much for what Kansas had to do. So we're going to talk about that, what came out, what this all means on this episode of the show. First, we are brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase the Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Okay, so here is the official ruling. In a decision announced Wednesday, the NCAA's Independent Accountability Review Process, IARP, led to a downgrade in the severity of the 5 Level 1 allegations against the program, ultimately judging this a Level 2 case. So each Level 1 violation carried with it, it was like a 1 to 3 year postseason ban. Not a single one stuck as Level 1. Dropped the entire thing down to Level 2, which is more minor violations. The independent resolution panel gave Kansas a 3-year probation with no effect on the program's postseason status. So there's the big one right there. There is no postseason ban for KU basketball. That was the big thing people were trying to avoid. Even if you had to flirt with the idea of possibly losing the 2018 Final Four, losing wins that season, it was better than the alternative of having a postseason ban. Now, we'll get to that. There's not going to be any of that either. So, even better for you. But no postseason ban. That's a huge win for all the players currently on the team that weren't a part of this. That's a huge win for the program, for the fans, for kind of everyone involved. And that's the big one here as part of all this. Now, as far as the 3-year probation, you might be wondering what that is. Well, it basically just means we're watching you. It basically just means that if you commit some other violation during the probation, you're basically already on strike 2, and your punishment will be more than if you were not on probation, right? It's like if you're on house arrest and then you commit another crime. That other crime you committed, the punishment's going to see it increase from what it normally would be, right? So let's get more into the case coming up here. First, though, this episode of the show brought to you by Jase Medical. Don't be caught unprepared. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jase case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from their physicians for any treatment-related questions. Doctor-created, doctor-recommended. Jase Medical is simple. You go online, fill out a form, fill out a prescription. Life-saving medications come right to your door. The Jase case gives you a peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using my code Locked On at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right, so more from the case. Obviously, the big one there, no postseason ban. You're on a 3-year probation. Head coach Bill Self, who was initially charged with the Level 1 violation and was suspended as part of the self-imposed suspension last year for 4 games, was instead charged with a Level 3 violation. So Level 3 is the I guess, least severe. Level 1 is the most severe. So it got knocked down big time and no additional penalties. And honestly, based on a Level 3 violation, a 4-game suspension might have been too much. So you might have actually overdone it in that regard, but not that it was a huge deal. And you went undefeated in those games, Norm Roberts, to begin last season anyway. Assistant coach Curtis Townsend, who was suspended 4 games last year as well, also had his charges reduced from Level 1 to a Level 2 and a Level 3 violation with no additional penalties. Neither coach faces a show cause order, which could have been applicable for Level 1 violations. So basically, bottom line here, it's been a long 6 years as we've been waiting for everything to kind of come out here. I mean, think about all the things that have changed over 6 years, maybe in your life or just along the way in KU basketball, KU football. Shoot, man, was that David Beatty? Was David Beatty the head coach of KU football when this stuff first started? Or was that Les Miles? I don't know. I think that might have been David Beatty. That is insane to think about, right? It's been so long. So just to be done with this, I think is good for everyone involved. Obviously, this means the IARP is no more. This was their final case as part of everything that stemmed with the FBI decision. So they're going to poof away, and the NCAA will probably come up with some new committee or some other ways of, looking into punishing teams in the future. I think this is more based on the other teams that this stuff kind of happened with as well. They didn't want to punish the current kids on the rosters, especially with it being 5-6 years down the road, and punish them by giving postseason bans. And I think you saw that. But again, with everything being knocked down to like level 2, level 3 violations, that was never going to be a conversation of a postseason ban anyway. And so the self-imposed punishments KU did last year ended up being enough for them. Now, one thing I didn't see is this, and we're going to hear from a press conference later in the day from all this, is how things are maybe affected by the scholarship reduction, because that wasn't mentioned at all in this. Like, is Kansas still having to do the scholarship reduction from the self-imposed part of this, or are they basically saying like you don't have to anymore, or has that already been accepted because it was self-imposed? I would assume they still have to do the scholarship sanctions that they kind of imposed on themselves. But it's just the black cloud is no longer hanging over you. And Bill Self is an unbelievable coach, an unbelievable recruiter, that he was still able to get a bunch of really good players to come to KU, even during when all this stuff was happening. He was obviously able to still win a national championship. But now it opens up recruiting even more. And it opens up recruiting even more from a standpoint of, I think you started to see it this year because they already have, a couple top 30 recruits, and they might add another top 50 guy here tonight with Raquise Passmore, that Kansas, as much as they've still brought in really good recruits, like Jalen Wilson was a top 50 recruit, and some of these guys, the guys who were top 10 recruits, the guys who were top 5 recruits have been fewer and far between since really go back to like Josh Jackson. And I think part of that probably does have to do with this case, that you still got on good recruits, but you haven't competed for the, Andrew Wiggins types of the world. And there's the argument to be had about what would you rather build your team with, and yada, yada, yada. But I think this opens you up even more, that other coaches can no longer negatively recruit you and be like, yeah, but they have this NCAA case hanging over their head. Do you really want to go there? They can get a postseason ban. Now you can no longer lie to recruits and negatively recruit that way. Like, I know there are certain coaches who like to negatively recruit. Some don't. I've heard guys like Scott Drew, like to negatively recruit. Who knows how much the truth there is to that, but that's kind of what I've heard on the recruiting trail, and that now you can no longer use that against KU. So it should open up recruiting even more, but it's just kind of a relief, and it's time for a new era, and it's time to move on. And that's the biggest thing of all this. And the fact that you didn't end up with a postseason ban was the biggest part of all this, because that was the one thing you didn't want to go without. You have the long NCAA tournament streak. March Madness is so much fun, especially when your team is in it, and especially when your team is good. And Kansas basketball, each and every year, you feel like you're competing for a national title. You feel like you're competing for a 1 seed for a Final Four, and even have 1 year where you don't even have a shot at it, where you wouldn't even have the motivation to get there. That would suck. So you don't have to worry about that now. We're going to finish up here with, reflection on what this all means, both in terms of Kansas and kind of nationally. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. You have a bunch of more or lesses on different things, whether it's yards or touchdowns, or in the MLB, pitcher strikeouts, hits. And you can pick more or less on a bunch of the different things. You can do a minimum of 2. You can do a maximum of 6. You get different payouts based on what you go through. You can even flex your payouts so that, if you pick like 5 things, and you can get a higher boost if you want all 5 to hit, or you can do like the flex payout, where if only 4 of the 5 hit, you get at least a little bit of money, but maybe don't get quite as much if all 5 of the 5 pick. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege with code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Finishing things up, reflection on all this. The number one bottom line here, whether it's Kansas, whether it's any other school, fight the NCAA. Always fight the NCAA on this stuff, for a multitude of reasons. Obviously, it took way longer than you could have hoped for, and you would have liked it to be done so much sooner. But fighting the NCAA, this was something that North Carolina did about a decade ago, and they got off without anything. This is something that Kansas did here. This is something that some of the other schools did that were part of this IARP stuff from the FBI trials. It worked out to the benefit, and when you look at some of the schools that did not fight the NCAA, like Oklahoma State, they leaned into the NCAA and they had way less stuff going on than some of these other schools and root over. They got a 1-year postseason ban in a year that, I don't know, they had a pretty good team. But they ended up, not having motivation and the record didn't look great. But, maybe if you have that dangling in front of you, it's a little bit different. And, Mike Boynton, their coach, talked afterwards, we would have never let them into our house. We would have never, I guess, I don't know, not fought them had we known what was going to happen. And he has since come out and been it's not that I want these other schools to have the same trouble we do, because I would feel bad for the kids, but it's unfortunate for us. So the moral of the story here, always fight the NCAA. And now that NIL is a thing, it's going to be a little bit harder, I would imagine, for KU or some of these other schools to be in the same position where you're even having to get to this point. Now, obviously, there are different loopholes and things that could get you in trouble with the NIL game, but there are more ways to legally, I guess, get through things now that you shouldn't have to worry about this anymore. And certainly, this is a new era in a good way for KU moving past this. Always fight the NCAA and their archaic ways. All right, that'll do it for this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We will maybe have another bonus episode for Keys Passmore picks KU tonight. We'll get to an episode tomorrow with Nick Schwert. We will also get to a KU Oklahoma State preview later in the week. This has been Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get any of your podcasts. You can also like and subscribe to our show on YouTube. Have a great rest of your day. See you next time.